Welcome back, fiber friends, to another episode of the Wool to Gold podcast. My name is Brian. I am your host, and I am a spinner, a crocheter, a fiber artist, and adventurer in general. We do some weird stuff with fiber, and this week we are getting a little extra weird with it. We're back to our normal format. It's going to be a little bit more organized this week, and we're going to be talking about pet yarn, specifically dog yarn. Before we get to that, I have some really exciting finished objects. I have some whips I want to talk about. And I do have some projects that I want to start, and I'm actually participating in a make-along, so we're going to talk about that as well. No acquisitions this week, nothing entering the stash, but we do have quite a few things leaving the stash. So I have finally finished this beautiful lacy scarf. This is all in Farmer's Daughter fibers. I just thought it would be a really fun little piece to make. You can probably tell because it's lace work, but I have not blocked it yet. But I have a feeling this piece is going up for sale on my website, and I have a feeling it's going to get snatched up pretty quickly. So I was a little concerned that if I didn't show it to you pre-blocking and pre-dropping it on the website, that you wouldn't end up seeing it. I don't normally sell my crochet pieces, but I have gotten a lot of requests, like a ton of requests from people to just have at least a few things available. So I'm also going to be putting up this little cotton linen number as well. I don't really have names for either of these pieces yet, but if you're following along on the YouTube, you get a sneak peek of things. So I finished this piece a really long time ago. This was a project that I worked on over the summer, as you can probably surmise from the type of yarn that I used. Yes, I'm very pleased with this. I'll definitely be showing you guys FO pictures once it is fully blocked out. And you'll probably be able to find those on my Instagram. That's it for crochet FOs, but I also have some yarn FOs and some very exciting ones. So first things first, what do I want to start with? I'm thinking we're going to start with this one. So this is my drop spindled skein of yarn. Yes, I finished the drop spindle project. I finally decided to take all the singles off and ply them. I'm naming this cyanobacteria just because I felt like I wanted to reference the fact that I made it on an older method of spinning, because drop spinning is ancient as heck. It's on that 100% hand painted Blueface Leicester, so this is really soft, and it's about 50 yards. Yeah, very pleased with this bad boy. A side-by-side comparison, just look at the difference between these two. I just think it's so clear that in such a short amount of time I was able to make so much progress compared to this, the first 6 yards? Yeah, the first 6 yards of drop spinning that I spun. I didn't start on a drop spindle if you're new here, and so it's been really fun adventuring in drop spinning. I haven't decided what I'm putting on my drop spindle next, but maybe I'll decide by the end of this episode. We'll see. Next up, in terms of mini skeins, I just have this little mini skein of merino and stellina. This was the butt end of the project that is drying back there. I'll bring that forward in a minute. This mini skein is definitely going to end up in somebody's yarn order. So next up are 2 breed samples that I had been meaning to get to. So first thing, I have the Brecknock Hill Cheviot, which I had a lot of fun spinning this. I've spun other Cheviot before. It was different than US Cheviot. I will say that. But it was a really fun spin. And then I also have, this was really interesting to spin, and I just had a lot of fun with this in general. It's the North Ronaldsay. So this is a primitive breed. It's described as dual coated, but I think it's one of those fleeces that I'd rather call just variable. So there's a number of different staple lengths going on in this fleece. I could have separated out the down, and I have to say the parts of the down that I felt were very soft. However, there was a lot of guard hair in this, and I was not going to pick it all out. I like leaving the guard hair in primitive breeds, especially for these breed samples. The purpose of doing these breed samples is so I get to experience lots of different kinds of fleeces and learn what I like and learn what I don't like, and mess around with different types of projects as well. So small felting projects with some of my fibers that are suited for felting. I've actually spun up a lot of those already and put them in a felting project. It's the mat that's on a little desk over there. So yeah, these were super fun. This yarn is not completely dry, so I'm not gonna like properly skein it. I have to be really gentle with it since it is a little damp still. But this is 100% merino and stellina, and it is spun from 2 braids from Xander's Cottage, 2 different colorways, both of them kind of in that like green blue. I'm calling it BMO is yarn. I'm a big Adventure Time fan. I have, if you've looked at the yarns available on my site, you can probably already tell there are 2 available right now that already have Adventure Time names, and so this will be skein number 3 with an Adventure Time name. I just like that show. I think it's cute. And this skein, once it was all spun up, it really reminded me of BMO, so I thought it deserved a BMO name. Now, if you've been following along for the raw fleece journey, this is your moment. So I've been processing a little bit of that CVM fleece. What I did is I sampled both hand combed and hand carded fiber that I did myself and applied them up. I finished the yarns. I actually already sent the hand carded sample. I am going with a carded prep. I just prefer it. I think this fleece is gonna spin up so nice in a woolen carded prep. I think it's perfect. So I'm going with the hand carded prep, but I sent the sample to my friend Sam. So I just wanted them to be able to experience the CVM squish. It is something that is so, it's just a good sheep to work with. If you have a chance to spin some CVM, please do. It's just such a pleasure. And this fleece that I got from Green County Wool is outstanding. I would absolutely get another fleece from them in a heartbeat if my wallet allowed. Fortunately, because of that though, I don't have the sample to show you, but I have made some progress. I said I was going to sample the fleece. I did. And I'm glad I settled on the prep style that I'm going to choose for the fleece, and that is one more task off of my to-do list. Otherwise, that is all the FOs. Moving on to whips. I'll be super honest. I have not cast on that cardigan yet. I bet if you look really closely, you can probably see the yarn hiding over here that I was supposed to cast on to a cardigan. I haven't done it. I was busy finishing another crochet project. I think I'm going to cast it on next week. If I do, I do. If I don't, life goes on. This is what I'm working on now for the most part. I have already shown this off. This is Noro's new Malvinas line. Guys, I really cannot say enough good about this. I usually don't like working with singles, especially as a crocheter in the US, where most yarn is finished in a way that is better, in a twist direction that is better for knitting. I don't crochet in a way that aggressively untwists knit style or knit spun yarn. However, I know there are some people who do, and with singles, sometimes I do get a little bit of splittiness. There is like no splitting with these singles, and yet they are still so soft. I'm very impressed. And again, the price point for Noro is awesome. I love Noro dye jobs too. I just think, I know the lighting is not the best because you don't know this. You probably can't tell. Maybe you can. It's a late night live. I'm coming to you late at night. It has been snowing a little bit and sleeting a lot today, so it's a little cozy. I thought we would chat. I literally just have the collar. I'm still doing the increases. I will probably do at least 2 more rows before I start working on, this is the Sheepy Shire. This is the colorway Plant Mom. It's this really nice green silk alpaca blend with just pops of magenta that I think are going to come out a lot once it is made into a fabric and once it is paired with this other magenta color. And then we are doing the cuffs, I'm pretty sure, or maybe a turtleneck, possibly, in these 2 skeins of handspun that I picked up at Maryland Sheep and Wool a number of years ago. They're just singles. They're not my handspun, as I mentioned, and I've just been hoarding them for a while. It's time to use them, and I think that all these colors are going to look nice together. So in terms of other crochet whips, as I mentioned, I have not cast on that project yet. I'll get to it eventually. And then if you are coming to the YouTube from TikTok, you already know. So this is one finished spun sample of new dog yarn. So this is Bow blended up with a little bit of Merino and Stellina from Xander's Cottage. This is the hand-carded prep, which I didn't love. I still really think I prefer spinning things like this from a roll lag. I get a more consistent result, and I just like the end yarn a little bit more. I'm still going to apply this up, though. This is definitely a whip, work in progress. And if you look carefully back there, you can see the roll lag hanging from my Lendrum, which is what I'm spinning it on since it is a smaller project. And I'm planning on putting a bigger project on my shaft, but I don't want to talk about that yet. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Here is one of the leftover dog roll lags. I had 3. I've already spun like 1.5. This is the last one. I just thought I'd show you guys. And again, once I have those samples done, you'll know about it. You'll be the first to hear. Now, before we start going in depth about the topic of this video today, which is just in general dog yarn, pet yarn, etc., I did want to talk about one other project that I'm planning on starting, one other like almost a whip. Okay, I've settled on the fiber that I'm going to spin for the Stitches and Starlight make-along. So if you don't already follow Tashiana over at Stitches and Starlight, she is Tangles and Starlight on Instagram. Go follow her. She is a wonderful human being. She has this sometimes segment on her podcast where she talks about things that are filling her up, and her podcast really just fills me up. It really just brightens my week whenever there is another episode of Stitches and Starlight. But she is doing a make-along, and a really low-pressure, fun one that has no rules, no theme, no breaks, as she puts it. It's all fun. So I thought I would pick something really special and maybe like a larger project for this make-along, because I knew I would actually do it because it's so low pressure. So it's essentially 2 months long. It started November 11th and it goes until February 11th. What am I spinning? If you've been here for a while, you probably recognize this already. This is from Nouveau. You can find her on Instagram, on TikTok. It is Ashley Martineau. She works with really interesting fibers. She does a lot of like sustainable and reclaimed fiber stuff. I just think she's really awesome. I like her style. And what I have here is about a pound of critically endangered wool. So this is from Drysdale sheep. Drysdale sheep are interesting. They only get 1 page in the Fleece and Fiber sourcebook, and I don't necessarily blame the Fleece and Fiber sourcebook for this, because it does definitely have some unique properties. So essentially, from what I understand, Drysdale are Romney sheep with the hairy gene. So they have this like coarser, hairier type fiber. It has this really definitely distinct feel to it. I think that people tend to like to generalize and clump all long wools or quote-unquote rug wools into the same category and say that they all feel the same. I don't feel that way at all. I think there's a lot of diversity in long wools and in primitive breeds. As I mentioned with the North Ronald, say, like with primitive breeds and dual-coated breeds, again, that term implies two different staple lengths, but with something like this, I was honestly managing like 3 or 4 different staple lengths, and honestly probably more than that if I had really looked a little bit more carefully. Drysdale are super interesting. So as this cute little slip reads, there's only 1 known registered flock of Drysdale sheep left in the world, and these colorways, I don't know which one is which, but the names are Alcott, Emerson, Hawthorne, and Thoreau. So they're the Philosophical Symposium Daiwei. Nouveau is known for their sort of like texture apothecary, but Ashley Martineau also works with a lot of like rarer wools, which is one of the reasons that I also really like her. I've sourced some Navajo churro from her as well, and I'll put all of her information below in case you want to check out her shop. Might be wondering, like, what the heck do you do with quote-unquote like carpet grade wool or coarser wools? So I have plans to make myself a jacket. I really want to make a crochet jacket, and one that's gonna last a really long time. And the cool thing about Drysdale fiber, because of this hairy gene that it has. So it is static free, essentially. It's known for making like really good static free environments. Its genes are used in some other really well-known carpet breeds. I have them written over here, one moment. They are part of the genetics for the Carpet Master, the Elliotdale, and the Turkadale, which I'm not super familiar with. Again, I like working with longer wools. I have a Lincoln long wool rug in my room. If you go on my Instagram and you scroll back far enough, I am 100% sure there's a picture of me holding it up like a big dork with a big old grin on my face if you want to see the Lincoln long wool rug that I made. But yeah, I really want to get this fiber spun. I just think that this would be a really fun project to do for the make along, especially because Tashi is somebody who also appreciates like a different type of sheep or a different type of fleece. Listen, we all love our soft and squishy wools, but I also appreciate she's put me on to some really interesting wool producers. There is a Canadian wool processor. I think, oh my gosh, what is her name? Melly Knits. I thought it was Melly Knits. I just wanted to double check to make sure I got the details right, and I'll put her information below as well. She has I want to pick up something from her super soon as my as my finances allow. I would really love to pick up, frankly, any sort of like interesting fiber from her. She has a lot of really interesting choices, and I just love that. So Tashi's got great taste in wool sources, so also go check her out for fiber recommendations in general. Dog yarn, sometimes called angora. Dog yarn is actually something that's been along for a lot longer than people expect. So historically speaking, we're actually wool dogs. So Salish dogs are dogs that they used to be native to Washington and parts of the British Columbia, essentially like the Pacific Northwest. Salish dogs were little white dogs. You can look into more of the background about them, but essentially we have evidence that shows that specifically indigenous people have used dog fiber for a number of years, not just Salish people and Salish dogs either. They have looked at some indigenous people's blankets from a number of other places and been able to prove that there's dog fiber in them as well. Now, one of the reasons that this may be is because simply like dogs are around, right? A lot of people ask like, why spin dog? Especially if you are a little bit grossed out by the concept, which, listen, you are not alone. Spinning dog is not for everybody. I don't take commissions on doing things like this. I don't spin other people's dog hair. If you do choose to spin dog hair for other people, just be aware that if you have a dog in the household and it is the opposite sex, that sometimes the dog will pee all over the fiber. I've heard horror stories from other spinners who have done it because people are willing to pay pretty good money for it. Essentially, people have been doing this for a long time, and it's because human beings have lived alongside dogs, and, you know, the fiber is there. A lot of us have the hair everywhere just anyway, especially if you have a long-haired or double-coated breed. And a really interesting thing about dog hair is it's actually 80% warmer than wool. So think about how alpaca and some other fine luxury fibers like yak are warmer than just wool alone, which, mind you, is already pretty warm and has some really interesting heat retention abilities when it comes to being wet and still being warm, which I think is really cool. But it is worth noting that dog fiber is actually warmer than wool, so by adding it to something like a blanket or a scarf, indigenous people were actually making these garments warmer. Mind you, it's also pretty sustainable since dogs are already a domesticated animal that a lot of people keep around, so why not use the fiber instead of just like throwing it away or it ending up in a landfill? There have even been more recent iterations of interest in knitting and crocheting with dog fiber. So one really famous book in the publishing industry that has been published for a number of years now is Kendall Crolius and Anne Montgomery's Knitting with Dog Hair. So the tagline is, better a sweater from a dog you know than a sheep you'll never meet. So that's another thing that I think is worth talking about when it comes to spinning dog hair. Sometimes people consider this a super ethical fiber since, again, you are just brushing it off of an animal that you already have in your household. There's a lot of discussions that we could have about like the ethics and the sustainability of different fibers, but that's not really what we're here to talk about today. Another reason that people might spin dog hair, and the reason that I spin dog hair, is sort of as like an art piece or a memorial piece. So if you were to spin a skein of 100% dog hair, I do think that, especially if you don't put enough twist in it, you're going to get a fair amount of shedding. So I don't choose to use yarns that are 100% my dog. I think if I spun 100% bow into a yarn, that I would probably just keep that skein as the finished object. Like I wouldn't turn that yarn into anything. The finished art piece would just be the skein of yarn. However, what I choose to do instead is blend that fiber with other fibers to make it last longer and be more resilient and limit the amount of shedding that occurs as well. By doing this, I do feel like I create a way more wearable fabric, and I'm going to show you an example of that. Before I give you some tips and tricks and just my general suggestions for spinning yarn, which a lot of them I got out of the fur issue of Ply Magazine, I'll show it to you in just a moment. I am going to show you a swatch of the dog yarn that I first made. So this is some bow blended with some local Corriedale. I think if I hold the fabric up, oh yeah, see that little halo that's going on there? That's all bow. That sort of tan halo that's occurring on a lot of this fabric. And again, I find this piece very wearable because I blended it. I'd say it's about like a 35-65 blend, where 65% of it is Corriedale, and the bobbins that I'm spinning up are more like, I'd say like 40-60, maybe even like 45-55. It's a higher concentration of bow, and I am seeing a much higher halo on that yarn. We'll see how that end product looks, but I really like this end effect, and again, I think it's actually a pretty wearable piece. If you're curious about what else is in here, let's see if I can name it all off. So this gray is Nicholas, the Suffolk sheep. This is one of the first fleeces I ever processed. More Corriedale. This is Shetland. This is some down fiber from Hidden Pastures Fiber Farm here in New Jersey that I hand dyed with logwood. This is Kent Romney. This is some Jacob. This is... Nope, this is actually colored Ryland, and this is the Kent Romney. I almost goofed. And then again, more of Corriedale and bow. So this is my breed study scarf. I really enjoyed this project. It's all hand spun, but that's what the end fabric ends up looking like. I kind of like to compare it to the halo that angora tends to give to a textile. Tips for spinning dog hair. So first, when you're collecting the fiber, so that you don't have to actually wash fiber that's super short and slippery like dog hair, I recommend collecting it right after you've washed your dog. That's what I do. I also recommend collecting it when they are blowing out their coat or during a major shedding season. I find that limits the amount of guard hairs that ends up in the fiber, and that's less work for you down the road. So maybe you are working with a fiber that doesn't have guard hairs. However, a lot of dogs, especially dual-coated breeds, and things like Angora rabbits do have dual coats, which means that you do have to remove these longer guard hairs. I find it's really worthwhile to remove the guard hairs. They're very prickly. They usually really like stand out. This is really just a personal preference thing. There are no fiber police. You can do whatever the heck you want. Another thing you should be aware of when storing pet fiber is that a lot of pet fiber, cat hair, dog hair, angora, all of these things are going to be prone to felting. So I recommend keeping them in a larger Tupperware so that they're not being squished down, maybe even a cardboard box, just not a tight plastic bag that you're constantly compacting, because you will find those fibers will compact and felt over time, and that's going to make it a lot harder to blend them and to spin them. Other ways that you can mitigate some of the shedding you might get from a dog yarn, especially if you choose to just spin your pet fiber all by itself. Let's say we are not blending it at all. I really recommend shooting for a thinner grist, so a lighter diameter of our yarn. I'd say, you know, if you can, fingering weight around that weight of yarn. Now, the reason I suggest this is because you want to be able to put enough twist in the yarn to mitigate some of this shedding. A lot of the issues that people have with angora yarns that are mill spun is that they shed. There's not enough twist in them to hold all those fibers together. Now, one of the cool things about hand spinning is that you can mitigate that problem yourself by just adding enough twist. Mind you that if you add too much twist, you may result in something that is a bit ropey or overspun. However, sometimes, it depends on what you're using this yarn for. You're not making this yarn into a scarf or something that's going to be next to skin. Maybe the yarn is really just all you want to make. You want to make a memorial piece for your pet and nothing more. Then these factors don't really matter as much. Go crazy. But if you are worried about mitigating that shedding, I recommend trying to make sure there's enough twist in your fiber. Now, if you are choosing to blend your dog fiber or your pet fiber like I do, then I do have some suggestions for the types of wools that might make it easier. Specifically, I'm going to recommend medium type wools. Now, you might be tempted to go with a fine wool to add a bit of softness, and again, I am no fiber police. You're welcome to do whatever the heck you want to. However, one of the reasons that I really prefer medium type wools is because a lot of them notoriously spin like butter, so they're easy spins, and I think that they can hold a fair amount of twist without getting ropey. I think essentially they can compensate for some of the downsides of a short dog fiber or pet fiber. One of the reasons that I blended Bo's hair with Corriedale is because Corriedale is just such a delight to spin. It's really easy to spin. It has some bounce and stretch to it as well, and I knew that the dog yarn all by itself has very, very little, if no give or stretch to it. And just like with these rollags that I made, I blended this up on my blending board.
Alrighty, fiber friends, so this is how I make those rollags. So I start by taking out my Golden Fleece Carter's blending board. This isn't sponsored. I just really like my blending board. It is a small business, so go check them out. I'll have them linked below. I load up a nice base layer. I like to sandwich the shorter fibers in between the longer fibers that I'm using. So here I am adding those dog fibers in between a layer of, well, 2 layers of Merino and Stellina from Xander's Cottage. I'm certainly no pro at using my blending board, but I have really come to love this tool. And I have to say, I love spinning from rollags. I know that spinning from comb top is like the cool, hot thing to do right now, but if you've never spun from rollags before, give it a shot. It is so fun, and it makes long draw a lot easier if you've been trying to approach a long draw technique and have struggled with it before.
As I mentioned before, another really great resource for spinning pet hair, besides, there's a really good Tiny Fiber Studio video. I'm going to link it below where she spins, I think, her cat's hair. I'm 98% sure it's her cat's hair, and I'm going to link that because I use that when spinning my dog's hair as just sort of a visual reference. That was really helpful, and she is just a really nice spinning teacher in general. But another helpful resource is going to be Ply Magazine. If you don't already subscribe to Ply Magazine, if you have the extra funds, I highly recommend it. I have my eyes on a Ply Guild membership for this coming year. I think it might be a really worthwhile investment, but I haven't made the plunge yet, so we'll see. But if I do make that choice, you guys are going to be the first to know. I reference this issue of Ply all the time. It's their issue 28, spring 2020. It's the fur issue. You can see there are these adorable angora rabbits on the front, and they have just a whole section about spinning dog fiber. So they have suggested dog breeds for spinning. Obviously these are going to be like longer haired dogs, so things like a Shetland and Spitzes, Akitas, Chow Chows. They also have this really awesome micron reference chart, so it compares the micron count to things like alpaca and merino fiber for a number of dog breeds. One other quick note that I did want to mention before I say goodbye to you guys for the day is that spinning cat fiber and angora is going to be a little bit different, and I did want to mention that cat fiber specifically is extra prone to felting, so do keep this in mind if you are spinning something other than dog. Be extra delicate and gentle with the fiber. I hope that even if dog yarn is really not your thing, that this episode kind of just expanded the way you think about fiber and yarn. Again, I'm going to mention that this is one of my favorite issues of Ply Magazine. It talks about spinning things like chinchilla, otter down, wolf fiber. I mean, what defines an art yarn is really the artist, you know what I mean? So you can create some really interesting yarns that don't necessarily look like a traditional art yarn, so like a super textured spiral ply or, a crepe yarn like some of the textured yarns that I make. Speaking of, if you made it this far into the video, I have my eyes set on a new art type spin where I incorporate some beads. So if you made it this far, tell me down below, have you ever made a beaded yarn? Are you interested? Do you guys want to see that process? Thank you so much for coming along on another episode of the Wool to Gold podcast. I can't believe how many people have just come and hung out on the channel and are interested in hearing all about my silly fiber adventures. I really appreciate it. If you don't already follow me on Instagram and TikTok, I'm going to link that information below, as well as link to my shop. I am going to be doing some little mini drops throughout the week if you missed my big drop that I had earlier this week of yarn. Thank you so much to everybody who already placed an order. I cannot believe how much yarn I have already sold during this yarn drop. It really helps keep me fiber rich, keeps me yarn rich, and it keeps me making new stuff and new content for you guys. So thank you again for all of the support. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and like it. It tells the YouTube algorithm that people like what I'm doing here and it shares it with other people. So thank you so much, and I'll see you guys on the next one.